So at the weekend, I finished Why Raeliana Ended Up at the Duke's Mansion. It is a manhwa adaptation of a Korean manhwa, and it was a pretty decent show, in my opinion. But I feel like it needs a second season of some kind. So the idea is it follows this girl called Yunha Park, or her name is changed to Rinko Hanasaki in the Japanese, because of course Japan has to change, just like Hollywood. Japan has to change Korean stuff to Japanese. But yeah, basically, she's from Seoul, and one day she falls off of a building, and she dies, and she ends up getting reincarnated in the story of the novel that she's reading, basically, or she's read. And the thing is, she's been reincarnated as a side character, and in the story, the side character that she plays, Raeliana Macmillan, gets killed off. So now she has to try and find a way to avoid her death, basically, of her character. And the story sort of follows. She ends up with the story's main male hero. What's it? Instead of the heroine getting with the Duke, who's supposed to be the main male love interest, she ends up with the Duke. She ends up becoming the Duke's fiance and staying at the Duke's mansion, and the story sort of follows what will happen. The most interesting part of the story is that the most interesting part is what's it? The story is supposed to be like a set linear story, right? Like when you read a book, the story's not going to change in any way. The story is what's written there, text, right? And the most interesting part is thinking about what's going to happen now that she's altered the course of the story, the main character, now that she's changed the course of, canon events. What happens now in this world? What's going to happen to the story now? Because now the events as they're supposed to play out aren't going to play out. Each story, like a novel is just text. It's words from start to finish, from the first page to the last page. It's a complete story. So now, what is going to happen now that she's changed the story? And it's really interesting to see how the different things she does to try and avoid her death and her interactions with these different characters in the Duke. I would say the show was decent, but I feel like it could have been longer. Like there were some very interesting interactions with her and the Duke, and I like the characters a lot in the show, but I feel like when right at the end of the show, the story was starting to get good, like Raeliana's relationship with the Duke, and I feel like just as the romance and things were starting to get good, it ends, and the story feels incomplete without a second season because they haven't managed to tell the whole of the original manhwa, and so the story feels incomplete, but overall it was not a bad show. It's a very unique concept. Japan loves their isekai stories, and I find it quite funny. All of the manhwa adaptations and stuff. They do, like, we've currently got airing a Returner's Magic should be special, and I find it quite funny that Japan likes adapting all of these, like, isekai type, I don't know, power fantasy stories. And yeah, it's not a bad show. Why Raeliana ended up at the Duke's mansion. I definitely would recommend going and checking it out. I would say it has a few things that could be done a bit better, and I feel like my main thing is the story feels incomplete. Like I feel like if it had been, I would have enjoyed the show a lot more if it had been like a two-core adaptation. If it had been, say, 24 to 26 episodes instead of 12 episodes. I feel like they would have been able to get more into the story. Like in the show, there's a lot of like sort of developments and things that are happening. Like the end of the show sort of teases a lot of the things that are to come in the story, but we don't get to see any of that. Like the show sort of teases like what's coming up, all the things that Raeliana has to worry about now, and be concerned about. And so I'm very curious as to how things are gonna go, how it's gonna play out now. And I think a second season would really help to do that. But yeah, I like seeing that, non-manga, like things like South Korean webtoons, manhwas, and web novels and whatnot are getting anime adaptations. I think it's very cool. I think like the show has a lot of good aspects. Like the soundtrack and animation are actually pretty good. Like I really like all of the character designs and some of the music in the show. The music sounds really, really good. Like a lot of the pieces are really fitting. And yeah, I would definitely recommend going and checking out why Raeliana ended up at the Duke's mansion. But I wouldn't say anything too special or too fancy. I wouldn't say have your expectations high.